Hi everybody and welcome to SA Rugby Magazine and Betway. Trying to figure out some sense in this rugby tour, who's going to win, why they're playing, and what's going to happen. I've got Scott Gibbs with me. Scott, welcome back to South Africa. Mark, welcome, as
Thanks,
always.
Kev.
Scott, what are you doing here?
Well, I'm here for the obvious choice. You know, I want to support the team, support the series. Obviously, a lot of consternation in the sporting sphere at the moment about what's going on around the globe with the pandemic. So I thought it incumbent on me to come back home. You know, got a real spiritual connection with Cape Town and certainly the Lions. So I made a special effort to get you.
Yeah, well, you've been talking about coming down for the tour. I suppose you fancy that you probably have a pint of Guinness or something like that, but that's out the window now.
Yeah, well, you know, I made it clear to you, Kev, that while the discussions were happening, is the tour going to go ahead originally, and was it then going to be redirected to the UK? And if that was the case, my intention was always to make a special trip back to Cape Town, see family and friends, and hopefully enjoy the beautiful hospitality of South Africa. Obviously, that has changed and is likely to change further. Notwithstanding that, still a test series to look forward to, and I guess we're all salivating for that opening game against the Emirates Lions to see, you know, what shape the British and Irish Lions are in and their chances going forward. Because I know this man has upset a lot of people in the British Isles about his predictions. So I'm here to defend our honour going forward.
Well, speaking of predictions, Mark, you did make the prediction that it would be a 3-0 easy win for the Lions. For the Boks. Do you still sit by that?
Yeah, comfortable. I said 3-0. I also questioned the selection of Alan Wynne-Jones as the captain and said they may as well send him through customs in a wheelchair, and he hasn't made it here. So I'm already kind of one step ahead there on that one. I still stand by. I've considered all the factors, no crowds, potentially 3 test matches in Cape Town, and I still think the Boks will be too settled. And Rassie being there, very important. Jacques Nienhammer being there on his own, I wouldn't quite have been as confident, but I still think the Boks will win the series 3-0.
Yeah,
at sea level.
And Scott, I mean, I don't know what science Mark is using, but I mean, maybe you can shed some light on will the Lions get pasted the way that Mark is saying?
Well, I think we have to apply an element of logic, is that the Boks haven't played. They haven't played a competitive test match since the World Cup final.
No.
The old adage says you're only as good as your last good game, which was that. Are they a settled squad? Who in the last 20 or so months has improved personally and has developed personally within that squad? And whose rugby has fallen off the cliff? I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen, certainly in the British Isles, you know, the domestic performances of the teams and the individuals, because I know you've gone through iteration after iteration of Currie Cup, so it's probably a little bit of boredom, and you maybe get sucked into this mystique that players are on form. So we don't know. There's a lot up in the air about how settled this Springbok squad is from a playing perspective. We have to just wait to see. But I think from a logic perspective, you know, you have a team of internationals. So the Lions is a collective of, you know, experience, a collective of expertise, not only in coaching from a player point of view, technical, physiologically, all of that. So that this bubble is kind of, you know, is something that's no different to any other touring party. They come to a shore, they prepare and train together, travel on a bus, stay in a hotel. You know, they go through the same kind of anxiety as any touring side. So this COVID issue is clearly something that's that they have to deal with. But I think that will galvanize them. And that's the whole benefit of these Lions tours is getting people together. And how they harmonize.
But there's something taken out of that tour, that dynamic in the tour, in terms of, you know, let's be honest, having a pint with your mates is a big part of it. You know, there's talk that only the match day 23 are allowed to go to the stadium. I mean, that surely disrupts a tour. Like you've been on tour before here, and a successful tour. I mean, how does that play into it?
It does affect the dynamic. It kind of, does it create greater resolve because of the conditions that you have to prepare under now? You know, I think if you're looking from a game day experience, the intimidation of walking down the tunnel onto the pitch in one of the big stadia here is an enormous thrill, because it creates, you know, it creates this kaleidoscope of emotions that you go through, that you necessarily go through in part of preparing against, you know, one of the world's best. So that's taken away. The fact is that some of the comforts of touring have been taken away, because you haven't got the freedom and latitude to go for a coffee, to have a nice meal, and to have a beer, and, you know, win, lose or draw, celebrate in that regard. So, you know, there's a lot of things that are going to go against them, but clearly they understand that footprint. Mm-hmm. That is the mentality that both sides have to adopt.
And who do you think it'll favour in terms of the empty stadiums?
Who knows? Who knows? I mean, it's the same for both sides.
I was hoping you'd know about it.
Well, no, listen, you know, you can pretty much, let's look at the first game, you know, the Emirates Lions. It's going to be the first game out of the traps. We don't know what the selection looks like at the moment, but I'm guessing a lot of the England representatives will have some game time this weekend. It's a game at altitude, which, you know, is another hindrance.
What's that like? I mean, what's it like playing at altitude? You've done it several times.
Yeah, and I think for a big portion of this this squad that wouldn't have had the exposure. So playing in Johannesburg at, you know, at
2,000 meters.
yeah, it's tough. So the physiological challenges are, and there's no real rhyme or reason for fitness, age, health. It affects everybody differently. But certainly it can equate to kind of 12 to 16% of physical diminished performance. So, you know, it's a big ask. You know, what happens? You know, what happens at altitude is that, you know, you get fatigued very quickly.
If you look, sorry Scott, if you look at the schedule, and you've got Lions on a Saturday, Sharks on a Wednesday, and you've got the Bulls on a Saturday. But none of the 46 Springboks are allowed to play in those games. So you've got very, very weakened, very youthful provincial lineups that are going out. And one of the things that Gatlin said that made the 2017 tour of New Zealand so enjoyable was that the Lions could get stronger throughout the tour because they were playing such quality teams every week. By the time they got to that first test and beyond, they were playing the New Zealand regional sides that had a lot of the All Blacks in it. Could you have a situation of the Lions, by rights, they should be 20, 30, 40-point winners in every one of these games, being deluded by the time they come to that first test, or not really quite knowing what to expect because they've really played no one?
Well, I guess because these tours now are condensed and more shorter, the focus is always only on about the 3 tests. We have, for all of the squad members in the Lions camp now, because it's 5-6 weeks of condensed football, there's probably only 120 minutes opportunity for you to put your hand up for selection. So Gatlin will be pretty sure as to what he perceives as 23, his strongest 23 is going into that first test in Cape Town. But it does give opportunity to everyone that will have exposure over the next 3 games, because clearly they're going to be competitive. You've got settled regional sides, but we are talking about a collective of internationals here. So I don't think it's going to be easy, and certainly won't be easy on Saturday for those who are kind of ring rusty and have been exposed to you know, the English Championship and going into an international arena with the added stresses of the physiological challenges of playing at altitude, which will only fatigue them as they go longer into the game. Whereas I think Gatlin's appreciation and also physiology behind the the jersey training camp and training in the hypoxic chambers is to get these guys physically in shape, so when they hit the first test they're starting to get stronger and will enable them to finish stronger in this test series.
Well, there may be the possibility of all tests being played in Cape Town.
Yeah, and the box historically, their record in Cape Town isn't that delirious, is it?
Yeah, and they've never played at the Cape Town Stadium.
Wow.
As a national team, and some of those players have actually never played there. They only really started playing the provincial rugby in the last year. But if you look at a tour, you've been on 3 Lions tours. For those who need to be reminded, 1997, you were the player of the series, famous for knocking over Oz, famous for doing a lot of things. How much do the Lions on tour? Because that 97 tour was really one of the first ones that we saw the 40,000 in the stands, the 30,000 Lions at every ground.
You couldn't tell who was home team.
Yeah, and they said the same in New Zealand in 2017 and Australia 2013. If you speak to the New Zealand, South African and Aussie players, they said they felt like they were playing away from home. How much do you feed off that as a player, firstly, and how do they make up for that in these build-up matches?
You definitely feed off it. I mean, I can resonate in that with just looking back, first test at Newlands, the crowd kept us in the game. There's certainly times during the game where you need that kind of visceral response from your crowd. But we've got these players, and we as supporters have got used to this kind of hollow feeling in stadia now, and it's crying shame that we've got this beautiful stadia here in South Africa that we haven't got no one watching. So
and the Euros have proven just how important the crowd is to a sporting event.
Well, if you look in the last 48 hours, of the soccer, England, Germany, or Switzerland,
even look at
France,
even Wimbledon tennis.
Even look at Wimbledon, exactly. Yeah. The connection that players feel with the stadia and the support is critical. I mean, it's just, homogenous. It's just, that's what sport is about. The theatre of sport is about the stadia. It's the personality that it creates and the performance that comes out of it. So it is going to be different. It's going to be totally different. And does that level the playing field? Probably does to some degree.
Because equally, one of the big demands of coming to this country is the Springboks playing in front of a very vocal home support. That's not going to be there. And those players collectively as a Bok unit have never experienced that because they haven't played. So it will be interesting to see how they go against Georgia on Friday night. And I also think that's a very good draw for them. It's like a real old copper stump session. It's going to be a bruising battle up front. Georgia don't have the backs to trouble them, so it's not a game they're going to ever be.
They scored 8 tries against Holland.
They did indeed, eh? They got kind of prepped for playing against the Afrikaans blokes up north.
Well, the Boks have to prepare. They have to have a shootout against somebody. There's no doubt, but it causes anxiety certainly because there will be injuries picked up and so on and so forth. But I think in best part the South African squad, if you look 4 months before the World Cup, it was settled. It was the first to arrive in Japan, so it was better prepared. So again, no stone unturned from Rassie's perspective and Jacques' perspective is that the collective, the expertise is there, just needs to have a run out, needs to have a clean bill of health, and then the focus will be on how much damage the provincial teams can cause against the British and Irish Lions.
Will that be coordinated with Rassie in terms of the way that he would like teams to play against the Lions?
Not so much, Kev, I think because of the bubble that has forced 46 players into it. Yeah. I think the original plan was that they wanted to beef up some of the teams, so they would have, anyone outside of the Test 23 would have played against the Lions and got a bit of insight into them. Yeah. I just want to go back to kind of originally being very, very vocal about a 3-0 thing and basing it on, you talk about how settled the Boks were, and outside of Beast who's retired and 1 or 2 players are unavailable, you've got the same setup. You've got Jacques Nienaber, the coach, but he was the defensive coach, and Rassie's still involved and he's very hands-on. The Lions are 4 teams coming together, which is always a challenge. You either hit it off or you don't. They had never played together until they played against Japan, and this Boks side has been in camp for 5 weeks by the time they played their first test, and they would have played 2 test matches. So how quickly does a Lions team have to gel to take on that kind of settled combination?
Well, it has to do it kind of instantaneously, doesn't it? And one thing that you have to create is harmony, and buy into a code of conduct. Put in all of the COVID challenges to one side. This is still a team that needs to prepare well. They need to understand their own limitations on what are the aspects of how we play. How are we going to play? Is this going to be a 100% Gatland-esque type performance, or are we going to see more of a greater influence from the attacking coach, and certainly from a defensive perspective? They have to be tight. There is no doubt about that. But on balance, I think he has chosen a side that is more than capable of winning this Test series, and that's the exciting thing about it. Because when it was announced, and the 10 or so omissions that a lot of the rugby peers were kicking and screaming about, my own instant karma was absolutely. Most of those were not playing well, not in the condition to come to South Africa and really challenge for a Test spot. And out of flavor, I wasn't surprised at all. So the freshness of his approach and the picks, I thought were right on point. And interestingly, after the Alun Wyn injury, Gatland mentioned the word, we have to be nimble, I have to be nimble. So they moved quickly on. And that's great. They're going to come out with a strategy against the Lions on Saturday for sure. We kind of want to see a DNA, a bit of a footprint of how the Lions are going to perform, how they're going to attack, what is their counter-attack going to look like. The key staples, Kev, the silos are obviously scrum, line out, breakdown, defense, strategy, which means possession, keeping the ball, discipline. Within those silos, there's the nuances, and where tactically do we want to be playing? Speed of ball, tempo, who creates that? How do we do that? How good are we going to be at the back? What is our counter-attacking strategy going to look like? So all these questions will be answered in the first 3 or 4 games now, to give us as supporters a level of comfort, a level of excitement about what the Test series can bring. Because Test games are different, because they are going to be pressure, there are going to be mistakes, who capitalizes on them. But rest assured, we want to see both sides enter into this with the right type of attitude, so we see a very disciplined Test series, because nobody wants to see people being sent off the field, which gives a side an advantage or not. And I think we will see that, because technically we have, at this moment in time, the 2 best teams fighting it off against each other.
If you look at Gatland and you look at Wales, and Wales is the one team that traditionally over the last 5 years has troubled the Springboks. They've kind of taken on an All Black type aura. I think we've had 2 wins out of 6 against them. And that World Cup semi-final, 1916, it got down to the 78th minute. It was as close as it was in 2015 when Farid Pre scored right near the end.
Yeah.
Do you see him going with a very strong Welsh influence in his Test team, and then the Irish, Scottish, English padding around that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Not because of the personnel. And like I said, I think he's pretty fixed at the moment as what he believes the best 23. I think the greater world maybe identifies with what's the most experienced 23. The interesting factor, and this is the excitement from my perspective, is the first three games now is that there's every chance for upsets in certain positions, because I think there's a question mark or an uncertainty over what is the best combination at 9-10 for the Lions. What is the composition of the front row? A lot of competition at lock. The back row, obviously you've been very vocal about some of the inclusions in the back row. So I think lots up for grab.
If you look at the Lions squad and you take the last time we've seen the Boks, 32-12 against England, we will see them play. 8 of the side that's playing against Georgia will probably play in the test match. Where are the areas that you would look at the Lions setup and say, potentially there's a vulnerability, or we really need someone to step up or kind of produce a performance we haven't quite seen yet?
Well, interesting you say that, because I can only talk about my perspective as being someone who's kind of in the middle of the field and seeing what I do, because I'm the wrong person to ask about, you know, scrums, lineouts, breakdowns, and the pressure that needs to be at, that pressure level that needs to be at to put an opposition under pressure. But I see two key areas of, not weakness, but places to channel, to try and find cracks. And the more you apply pressure, the more that space appears. And I think that is from a set piece scrum, the relationship between 9 and 10. I would like to see us probe that, you know, on 2-3 acute angles. And I think there's an inherent window of opportunity inside 13 and just outside in that 15-meter channel, where I suspect, from Gregor Townsend's perspective, that we will want to flood a lot of our outside backs into that channel to create some separation for when the secondary defensive lineup sets up, you know, the scramble defense, that we create a little bit more chaos. But I see that unfolding. So we see this kind of footprint, or get appreciation for how the Lions are going to attack, their intent in attack, and what that looks like. Because there's certainly the personnel to do it, but not without prudence. We have to have the ball. We have to keep the ball, win the ball, and create quick ball. So those challenges will be set for the guys in the next couple of weeks. That's what makes it so interesting, because we can have a conversation in a couple of weeks' time, as will the greater world, as to what is the best starting 23 for the Lions. And for sure, it will change throughout the test series.
If you take the Japanese first 40 was very impressive, and obviously it lost shape of the game when they made all the changes in the second half and a couple of injuries. They're now playing a domestic Lions side that a week ago lost 39-10 to the Pumas away from home, and it's the same side that's playing. So Joe Public is saying, well, if they lost 39 to the Pumas and it's not the Argentinian Pumas, this Lions side should come in and destroy them. But that's not quite the case, because they're going to be looking at combinations, quality of performance more than a scoreboard. But if they do struggle, how much pressure does it immediately put on a team if you struggle against a side that's taken a beating against one of the weaker sides in South Africa?
Let's answer that one first. I mean, listen, pressure creates pressure, and you know, understanding what pressure is in a game day situation is totally different to pressure from a coaching, you know, perspective, and how they deal with the press afterwards. So listen, there's a huge expectation that the Lions come out of their traps early, and this is a very strong performance. But I think Gatland will want to manage that performance and manage the combinations, as well as managing the scoreboard and managing the clock, for sure. But if they don't perform, then it just creates fuel for people like you to further undermine. But the fact is, you know, preparation is key. Why aren't these players, these international players, as a collective, you know, whitewashing teams like the Emirates Lions? But the Emirates Lions, they're a competitive side, you know, they're a settled side. Yes, they had the loss last weekend, but this is their nadir. This only happens once every 12 years. I mean, I saw a little post, really nice post from Yanni Duplessis. You know, comfortable on the bus, heading to training. What a week! This is their biggest game for some of them of their career. That's what this tour represents. So we have to look at it like that.
Cool. 3-0.
Listen, I'm not. It's not that I don't want to commit to anything.
Let's look at the betting for a second, because the Lions are favored 1.7. You're saying it's going to be 3-0, and I was saying that earlier on as well. Maybe I was a bit influenced. Maybe I was drunk when we did that video, Mark. I'm not entirely sure.
I know, you had watched the Chiefs play and Gatland was still coaching them.
That's right. Yeah, he had won a game with the Chiefs.
Exactly.
Anyway, so the betting is on the Lions. It's come in. I mean, the Lions were more heavily favoured about a month ago, but something's happened in the betting. Maybe the sharp money's coming in for the box. I mean, Rassi's managed to spin this wonderfully in terms of everything that he said in his press conferences, and he is the guy that took us in 2018 from number 8 or 7 in the world to winning the World Cup, and he did say that we could win the World Cup. So he's got a lot of He's got a lot of gravitas and street cred in the way he's prepared teams before. But if I gave you both $100,000 and said, okay, bet it on the team you think is going to win the series, Mark, are you still betting the 100 on the box?
Yeah, I would bet it on the box, with one disclaimer. There could be a red card in the first 2 minutes.
No disclaimer.
So I don't think the box with 14 could beat the Lions with 15. So if 15 stays on the field against 15, I think the Springboks will be too strong. They will win all 3 tests, regardless of where they played. And I don't think it's an indictment on the Lions. I really think this is a very good Springbok squad.
Well, maybe we can find a bookies that'll give you money back if there's a red card.
It's an interesting element because, you know, what we've learned over the last 18 months, you know, what the world has learned is that, you know, this pandemic has taught us a lot of lessons. Is that what will happen will happen. I mean, it's, you know, we are not in control. But if you are in control of your discipline and your appreciation and ferocity at ruck time is technical and it's just, and you keep everybody on the field, then this test series has all the hallmarks of being one of the best. You know, you go back to 97, it was a great test series. I mean, Lions shouldn't have won, didn't have a kicker, all of those kind of nuanced elements, as you said, definitely kind of created this mystique which the Lions are carrying forward. 2009 test series, incredible series of football. And this has all the hallmarks. But if you'd have given me $100,000, Kevin, and we go back to the original schedule, first test, Cape Town, second back in Gauteng, I'd probably have to favour the box. With full crowds, with full support, because it is that tough of a series, of a body of work that you have to get to. But the fact is that maybe we are looking at 3 tests in Cape Town in the stadium. I think that neutralizes the not neutralizes, wrong word. It kind of minimizes the box kind of influence over their ability to dominate a test series, because I think all bets are off in that sense. It's that, you know, level playing field, playing in Cape Town, a stadium that's not familiar to either team.
Yeah.
So, you know, logic says that, you know, from a betting perspective, the Lions should be ahead in that wager.
But if you take again, while I disagree with you on that, is
I like to have thoughtful disagreement. Yeah.
is I've been quite amazed at how comfortably the bookies have made the Lions favourites, how comfortably they've spoken about a Lions squad that up until a week ago hadn't played together. What has given this Lions, or what gives credence to this Lions being the favourites?
I don't know. I'm not a betting man. I'm not a bookie, so I don't know how that works. But what I do know is
Does it surprise you, Scott?
Of course, it does surprise me, because, you know, the Boks are world champions and they're playing at home. I mean, you've got a tour inside, as you said, all come together. We all know that Gatlin is a wily fox, and whilst his
not so in New Zealand.
Well, no, that's right. I mean, his Chiefs form really didn't depict who he is as a coach, and his ability to galvanize players. Because if you speak to former players and players who played under him, they do speak very highly of him. Yeah. So he knows the challenge. He does like to play the press. You know, he will deliberately put pressure on the Lions to perform. And he is someone who is very outspoken about, you have to prepare well. He likes to see players, you know, training well. And, you know, if you play well under Gatland, you know, you get rewarded. But he understands, again, you're only as good as your last good game. So if you don't turn up, you don't perform, your opportunity is lost. And that's the great opportunity, or the window opportunity for players who, for the greater world, may be seen on the periphery. And we don't know. We haven't seen Chris Harris, you know, perform at this level, but a very exciting player, and a player that could be very disruptive against the Springboks. So there are a huge amount of question marks, which is the great part of where we are now. It'll change over the evolution of this tour, and
there'll be no shortage of content, will there? I mean, no. And right now we're trying to get a snapshot in any snapshot. You know, last week we got to see Japan versus the Lions. This week we get to see 2 more snapshots of the teams, and try and piece together who's going to win this tour.
That's right. We can disseminate, we can speculate now as to what the game will represent and how the Lions will play on Saturday. I mean, how the Emirates Lions play is totally up to them. I mean, ultimately it's their hosts. They're the hosts. It's their city. It's their ground. We know how difficult it is going to be for the Lions to go at altitude and perform and stay in the game and finish strong. But it'll give us a flavour as to where those English players that have come in who haven't been part of the jersey preparation because of their commitments, where they are they on point? You know, Farrell's form, Itoji's form. There's a lot of question marks, good question marks, but they have to be answered not only to us as the wider public, but to the guys, to Gatland and his team who are going to make the call and going to make the ultimate call. This is the best 23 to go up against the Lions in the first test.
Just 2 questions from a Bok perspective. As a player, you've played under Rassie Erasmus for 2 years. He's been the boss. His defense coach is now the boss, but he's still in the mix. How difficult a challenge would that be, do you think? Or would it be a seamless transition? And then once you've answered that one, 2 Southern Hemisphere referees for the 3 tests, do you think it will be significant in terms of interpretation?
Yeah, I think both very interesting questions. And I think one thing that I've garnered over Rassie's kind of involvement is that he has actually defied kind of all expectations for South Africa, and and I think that was.
Well, we lost to Italy.
Yeah, so the fact is that his preparation, his body of work was judged with obviously winning the World Cup. I mean, you can't do that by luck.
He painted a Rembrandt.
Absolutely. So he knows all of the constituent elements that need to be fought and won on the football field. And there's a lot of talent in that squad. There is no doubt about that. There's few coming back from injuries. There's still a question mark on a few players that may come back into the fold to strengthen and galvanise. But it is. I don't think there's any issue about what legacy that Rassie leaves if this is his last rodeo for sure. And this is obviously a start of a beautiful journey for Jacques as well, being elevated from defence coach into head coach.
Maybe a hospital pass. Two games against New Zealand after the Lions in New Zealand.
Yeah. And listen, there's always a bigger picture. Yeah. There's always a bigger picture, and the immediate focus now, the myopic nature, is this 3-test series against the Lions, because it's just a building block to where they want to be as a nation in 2023 in France. Simple as. But for Gatland, different. It all finishes on August the 8th, August the 9th. That's what it is. How influential will be the Southern referees? I think there has to be 100% clarity from them in their discussions with the Lions management about how the game is going to be adopted, refereed at certain key elements. And what are the key elements we always look at? Gatland is very strong on how the scrum is refereed, and obviously at the breakdown. And both of those elements are key elements to create tempo into the game, and we want to see a high tempo series for sure.
And you talk about defense discipline. If you look at the statistics in the last 2-3 years, including the World Cup, the team that doesn't have the ball wins, if they can maintain their shape and they can make their tackles. So you've seen all these games where teams are dominating possession 65, 70% to 30, field position 70, 30, and they take in a beating. Down to that discipline, but also the referee interpretation of teams with the ball also get pinned a lot more than teams without the ball.
Yeah, I didn't know that one, but I mean, I know you are, you're one for that type of stat. I'm always more of a flow and feel type of guy, and so not someone to add color commentary to it, but yeah, listen, you have to be strong defensively. There's an orientation that you have to follow. listen, from my expectations and my experience against South Africa and playing against the Springboks is, you don't realize how big those thighs are. You don't realize how quick those guys are. You know, and when you line up against them, you know, walking out the tunnel, it is literally, fuck. And then the intensity and the ferocity and the aggression and the way that they ran at you, you know, is intimidating. So you constantly have to be dialing that up, your internal kind of combustion engine about, right, we have to be right on point. So those tackles have to be pinpoint. They have to be harder than I've ever been able to do them. I have to be able to run and you know, and maneuver better than I've ever been able to do. So if the conditions are conducive to that, because we've certainly got the pitches for that, but if the mother city is kind with the weather, then we do have all hallmarks of this being a fantastic series. But you know, let's be honest, the Springboks, they hit hard. You know, they're a tough bunch of, you know, guys. So there'll be no quarter given. And then you get to see the minerals. You get to see who really steps up, stands out from a British and Irish Lions perspective. And that's what tours are made of. Small little moments where you go, whew, wow.